The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to EVPA's webinar on social enterprises and public procurement. My name is Eleanor Dupret, and I'm the Public Affairs Manager at the European Venture Philanthropy Association. I'll be moderating today's session, speaking to you from our office in Brussels. It's really a pleasure to welcome you all for this session today. Before we dive into the topic of today's webinar, I would like to share with you a few housekeeping rules. Throughout the session, you will be able to open or hide the control panel, which is the console that appears on the right-hand side of your screen. Note that the control panel automatically collapses when it's not being used, but you can keep it visible via the View menu on the top. In the audio section of your control panel, you should tick the microphone and speakers option if you're joining the webinar through the internet. If you are using the telephone rather than DV or IP, you must choose telephone, and then you will receive the PIN code to access the audio. If you encounter any technical issues, please don't hesitate to contact my colleague Candela here in EVPA's office in Brussels. You can see the number here to reach her, or also on our website. At the end of this session, there will be a Q&A. During the second part of the webinar, there will be a Q&A during which our panelists will be happy to answer your questions. So if you do have a question, don't hesitate to write it down in the questions section of your control panel, and this throughout the session. Please do not forget to clearly mention to whom you would like to address your question. All the questions will be directed to the panelists during the Q&A time, so at the end of this webinar. If your question has not been answered during the webinar, feel free to contact us via email afterwards, and we will do the necessary follow-up. You can also use that question section to let us know about any technical problem while connected to the webinar. Since the number of participants to this webinar is quite high, we are keeping the participants muted. Last but not least, this session is recorded, and you should be able to watch the recording and consult this presentation as of next week. For that, I would invite you to visit our website and in EU webinar series section. So now that these housekeeping details are clear, let me first give you a quick word about the European Venture Philanthropy Association. As some of you already know, EVPA is a membership organization currently gathering more than 190 members based all across Europe. These include foundations, social investors, academic and financial institutions, as well as service providers. Since 2014, EVPA has integrated a dedicated policy dimension, which relies on two main pillars. First, EVPA is acting as a European thought leader, voicing and collecting and voicing the concerns and expectations of its members to European as well as national policymakers. Secondly, EVPA is progressively building a hub for national policy making, gathering and sharing very interesting policy initiatives that are being undertaken in European countries. You can find more detailed information about EVPA's policy activities on our website. As you can see on the left-hand side of this slide, the webinar is part of our EU webinar series, which is one of the activities we are implementing as part of a partnership we have with the European Commission. At the end of this session, a very short survey will pop up on your screen. As your feedback is very useful to improve what we do, we would greatly appreciate if you could take 2 minutes to fill it in. Now, with all this in mind, I think we can officially launch today's webinar. Public procurement is not always very well understood by the public, but it's definitely an important topic in the venture philanthropy and social investment space. When supporting social enterprises, one of the main objectives of venture philanthropists and social investors is to help social enterprises build sustainable business models while eventually allowing them to scale up and access new markets. Can this sustainability help social enterprises access public procurement markets? How can they become suppliers to the public sector instead of depending on subsidies? To what extent are public authorities buying social today? Are they encouraged to do so with the recent reform of the European Union? To address these questions about the implications of public procurement on social enterprises, we are very, very pleased today to gather great experts from the European Commission, but also social enterprise specialists and lawyers from the UK, an Estonian foundation doing great advocacy work in this field, as well as an outstanding social entrepreneur who is transforming the way cities solve problems across the world. So I'm very happy to welcome here our speakers. Anna Lupi is legal officer at the European Commission. Anna is working in the Public Procurement Strategy Unit of the Directorate General for Internal Market, Industry, Entrepreneurship and SMEs, also known as DG GROW. And Anna is sitting with me here in Brussels. To talk about the situation in the UK, we also have the pleasure to have with us Jonathan Bland, Managing Director of Social Business International, and Julian Blake, Partner and Joint Head of Charity at the law firms BWB. I'm also very happy to welcome Merlin Sepp, who is the Head of Social Innovation at the Good Deed Foundation, based in Tallinn, Estonia. And to complete this great panel, we also have with us Sasha Haselmeyer, the CEO of CityMart, which is also a recognized Ashoka Fellow. So to give you an idea of the program of today, Anna will first give us an overview of the reform of public procurement in the EU. Then Jonathan and Julian will depict together the situation of public procurement in the UK. Merlin will then share with us her experience of advocacy in Estonia before leaving the floor to Sasha, who will let us know more about procurement as open problem solving in city government. So I think that without further delay, I can leave here the floor to Anna. Anna, thank you for being with us today, and I'll let you speak here about the reform of the Commission.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Eleanor. And as she said, well, she's already introduced me. I work in Directorate G, which is dealing with internal market for public administration, which in EU jargon basically means we're dealing exclusively with public procurement policy and legislation. And I'm going to be talking about the EU public procurement reform. In particular, I'm going to make a little bit of an introduction, then explain the objectives of the social aspects of the new rules, and give you an insight on the tools for social enterprises that have been introduced with these directives, in particular reserved contracts, both in a general context and in the context of the light regime for services, and then general rules on technical specifications and contract forward criteria. Now, with regards to general information on the reform, it's a package that has been adopted in April last year, and it's composed by 3 directives, 2 of which basically replace the current classical directive and the directive on utilities and a new instrument on concession contracts. The transposition deadline for these instruments is April next year, meaning that the member states will have 2 full years for transposing these rules in their national legislation. And as of April 2016, the new rule will come into force. So this means that currently the older rules are still applied unless a member state has already transposed the new rules, which is the case, for example, of the UK that has transposed the new classic directive. This reform was promoted with the objective of mainly simplifying and making rules more flexible, both for contracting authorities and bidders, while ensuring that procedures abide by transparency and non-discrimination principles, and also to afford better access to some stakeholders to public procurement procedures, among which SMEs. But it was also promoted with the goal of fostering a strategic use of public procurement, meaning that public procurement is a tool that public administrations can use to drive forward certain policies. And so in light of this, the directive gives a certain set of tools to public authorities to drive forward these objectives. And this happens in the field of environmental protection, promotion of innovation, and of course promotion of, let's say, socially sustainable behavior. Now, the objectives of the social aspects of the reform were to foster social inclusion, first of all, encourage both bidders and contracting authorities to promote socially sustainable or socially responsible behavior through public procurement, and also ensure that existing legislation in certain fields, among which social and labor law, is complied with in public procurement procedures and in the performance of contracts. Now, I am going to focus mainly on the first two objectives today, which are probably more interesting to you. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the instruments that are made available by the directives and that contracting authorities may choose when tendering out public contracts. The first I want to talk about is reserved contracts. There is a general discipline, there is a general legal framework in the directive for reserved contracts for sheltered workshops, meaning those bidders that basically have the aim of social and professional integration, particularly of disabled and disadvantaged persons. And so this is applicable, this legal framework is applicable to all types of contracts for works, services, and supplies. What does this mean? It means that contracting authorities can basically decide to reserve certain public procurement procedures only to this type of bidders. There is only one condition that has to be complied with, and it is that the staff of the undertaking in question has to be composed at least by 30% by disabled or disadvantaged persons, which also constitutes a little bit of an improvement on the current directive, because currently the threshold is a bit higher, it's 50%. Now, this is a general, this applies to all types of services and contracts. However, there is also within the directive a list of health, social, and cultural services which enjoy a much lighter regime in terms of obligations. And among these, there are certain reserved contracts which are addressed to very specific type of bidders. These contracts are mainly, as I said, health, social, and cultural services. There is an exhaustive list, which is in Article 77 of the directive. And in this case, public authorities who are tendering out a contract can also decide to reserve these contracts to certain bidders who respond to a set of conditions. You can see them on the slide. Basically, they have to pursue a public service mission, they have to reinvest their profits in this mission, they have to guarantee that the undertaking is run according to employee ownership principles, and they must not have been awarded a contract within the previous 3 years. although this is not entirely clear from the wording of the directive, the main purpose was to allow basically contracting authorities to reserve these contracts for certain non-profit companies. Now, the maximum duration of contracts is also 3 years in this case, and these, let's say, timelines are established in order to ensure that the market does not get distorted, basically. So what does it mean for a social service contract, a public contract, to be awarded under the light regime? Well, first of all, there are obligations on transparency. This is what we call obligations on transparency, is about publication of notices, meaning that the opportunity to get a contract with the contracting authority needs to be advertised properly, and also when the procedure is over, it has to be made public who the contract was awarded to. For this type of services, there are no specific procedures, and member states are required to adopt national rules which of course can be chosen freely by the member states, but they have to, of course, comply with transparency and equal treatment principles. And also there is a higher threshold for the application of the directives. So this means that contracts that are falling below this value of 750,000 euros are presumed to have no cross-border interest. This means in practice that the rules, the EU rules on public procurement do not apply, and member states can have a free choice of tendering out these services the way they want. Regarding the award of these contracts, I will just be very brief on this because I will talk about contract award criteria later on. But basically, the one thing to keep in mind here is that contracting authorities must always have the opportunity to take into account quality criteria when awarding this kind of contracts, which in practice means that they cannot rely solely on the fact that the price is very low. And then, of course, this also opens up the possibility for contracting authorities to evaluate a number of criteria like accessibility, like the needs of the users, etc., etc. Now, going back to a more general legal framework regarding in general public contracts, but anything that may be awarded also to social enterprises, I would like to talk first of all about technical specifications. Basically, technical specifications are a part of a public procurement procedure where the contracting authority sets out what are what have to be the characteristics of the contract or the performance that is required by the bidders. And here the contracting authority may refer to not only to the technical specificities of a certain performance, but under the new rules it can also refer to a specific process of production or how a specific stage of the life cycle has to be rolled out. Of course, these technical specifications must always be linked to the subject matter of the contract, so they have to be in a way consistent with what is required in the performance of the contract. And this in practice means that that a social enterprise can be required to apply a specific process when producing something or when performing the contract. To give you a more concrete example of this, we could maybe think about a provision of, for example, catering services for certain categories of people, or I don't know, for example, for migrants, and having a requirement that there has to be kosher food, or there has to be the possibility of vegetarian meals, or et cetera, et cetera. Now, within the technical specifications, it is now possible for a public authority to require that the social enterprise has a sort of label or certification, and clearly under certain conditions. I mean, you can see them in the slide. Basically, as always, they need to be linked to the subject matter of the contract. They have to be objectively verifiable. The label has to be awarded according to an open and transparent procedure, and the labeling authority cannot be influenced by other parties, and these labels have to be accessible to all potential bidders, let's say. So this, to give you an example of this, how it can be used by the contracting authority. Well, the contracting authority can require, for example, to stay in let's say the catering example, they can require to use only fair trade products to deliver the service. Now, with regards to the award criteria, as I said before, in the light regime, you can only you can only evaluate the quality aspect of the offer. Whereas normally in the general discipline for public contracts, you can award according to the quality or price, or have a quality price ratio. But here the novelty, I would say, is that you can take into account explicitly under the provisions of the new directive qualitative and social aspects, or factors related to the specific process of production or provision of the service. And there are concrete examples in the directive. There are a few of them. They're non-exhaustive, of course, because the contracting authority can always choose more or less how to evaluate an offer that it has received. But what this means in practice is that when an offer is evaluated, the contract can be awarded on the basis of all these qualitative and socially relevant aspects. And so, for example, if let's say the requirement is a commitment from the entrepreneur to employ the highest number of disabled people, then clearly the higher number of disabled you are employing as an entrepreneur, the higher score you might get when your contract is evaluated, and then the better chances you have to actually being awarded the contract. So one final caveat, let's say, is that contracting authorities can never require from an employee, from a bidder, to abide by certain corporate policies, because by definition corporate policies are not linked to the subject matter of the specific contract that is being awarded, but they and so, for example, corporate social responsibility cannot be required as a general policy in the course of a public procurement procedure. So this is the end of my presentation. I hope I gave you more or less an overview of what's new in the reform of public procurement. And of course, if you have any question, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Anna, for this. I think it's very useful. I know that when we prepared this session, there were quite a number of national regulators that are still working on the implementation and that are interested to understand where the rules are today. They still have a year and a bit more than a year and a half for the implementation. I really hope many countries will take this opportunity to make this access to social enterprises easier. I think it's the time to actually see what's going on in the UK. We have the pleasure to have with us Jonathan Bland, who has always also been quite active in this topic within the expert group of the European Commission. I hope he's now together with Julian Blake, but I will let Jonathan take it over from here and present us the situation of public procurement in the UK. Jonathan, the floor is yours.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly. Perfect.
That's fantastic. Okay, and I'm very pleased to say that Julian Blake from BWB is here with me as well. So yes, thinking a bit about the situation here and the context. If we go back to the Social Business Initiative, which in a way sets out the focus from Europe on really trying to get the most from social enterprise, much of the kind of reforms of the procurement directive, and particularly the kind of social considerations having a higher degree of sort of visibility running through that, and some of the reforms is very much in tune with trying to promote a better legal environment for social enterprise. If you have the next slide. And it was recognised in the Social Business Initiative for the kind of innovative models and solutions that it brings to some of the big challenges that face us here in Europe, like climate change, the ageing population, endemic levels of unemployment, and the need to kind of regenerate our towns and cities and the economies that go with them. And now, obviously, we have the big challenge with migrants, and there are solutions that play to all of that. But there was a need to have a much greater visibility of social enterprise models and the kinds of things that they do. And in the past, I think there was a tendency for much of the focus just to be on labour market integration, which of course is very important. But the whole role of social enterprise, and particularly in relation to the delivery of public services, goes much wider than that, certainly in the UK. It fits to ideas around creating social value, and there was considerable work that we did at European level, creating the impact framework for how to look at social value. You can have the next slide. If we think here specifically the context of the UK, well, we've really seen 20 years of development of social enterprise playing a greater role in public service markets. We've had recognition of the different kinds of social enterprise models and support for them from successive governments, particularly the Blair government, and then going forward through the coalition government, and now under the current one. And we've seen growth of social enterprise models in public service markets, particularly for providing leisure and housing and health care and education, where we've had very substantial numbers of new businesses being created. And we've also seen a kind of transformation of the voluntary sector. Some of the traditional social economy organisations moving into being businesses and moving into service delivery. And we've also seen here, and this I think links to one of the new provisions in the Procurement Directive, a growth in the transformation and spinning out of certain publicly run services into new models of social enterprise. And in the UK, these are very often referred to as public service mutuals, and the government here has a programme to support the growth of these businesses. And this all links into sort of wider measures on commissioning and social investment. We've seen generally across the public services in the UK a move towards really trying to commission for outcomes and using procurement as part of that commissioning process and tying that to things like social investment. So we've seen the ways that new kinds of investment through things like social impact bonds can provide new ways of being able to organise services focusing on outcomes. We've also had a particular piece of legislation in the UK called the Social Value Act, which legally sits under the EU rules but puts an emphasis on commissioners to consider social value, and my colleague Julian will explain a little bit more about that. We also have some really great examples here of what social enterprises can do at scale, and the group of businesses that I work with, the E3M group, I think really illustrate this. We can have the next slide. So just a couple of examples. HCT Group, we're a very small community transport provider, just doing community transport for disabled people in the area of London, of Hackney. And they just lived year to year with a small grant from the local authority. And they realised that actually if they moved into trading in the market, using their knowledge of transport, they could have a much greater impact. And so they actually moved into the London bus market, which is a very competitive, highly regulated market, where they win contracts on price and quality, beating some very other large players, but they're then able to reinvest the profits that they make from that into the other services that they provide. And they now run a whole range of transport services across the UK and also in Jersey and Guernsey. And one of the things that they're very keen to do is to work with the public authorities to use things like open book accounting to get real partnerships. And so, for example, where they're working in Jersey, they actually have a profit share with the authorities there, so that over and above a certain amount fixed in the contract, the profits that they make from running the service are shared between them and the authorities. And that partnership's had a real effect in the way that the whole kind of transport system there has been redesigned, and it's actually led to a reduction in petrol imports into the islands. And they're doing very similar innovative things in other places across the UK. Another example, Stanwell Community Caring Trust, is an example of a social enterprise that came out of a local authority and provides care services, domiciliary care and also residential care for elderly people and also people with some severe disabilities. Their model as well works very much on a partnership basis with the local authorities, and in one area, for example, they won a contract to build 3 new care homes, and part of that offer that they made was that they would actually give the properties back to their local authority, even though that they were building them at the end of the contract, which made it a very different proposition to what the private business were offering at that point. So there are some very interesting examples. We've got lots more in other sectors, but businesses that are social enterprises that are operating at scale and bringing huge innovation. And I think one of the things that we heard earlier is the importance of really trying to get more for our money in the way that public expenditure is being used. I think about 20% of GDP in Europe is public expenditure. Well, we need to get innovation from that. We're not in a position where we can just stand still. You can have the next slide, please. So the application in the UK, how social is it? Well, I'm going to pass over to my colleague Julian to talk a little bit about some of the fundamentals here.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. So I'm a solicitor specialising in charity and social enterprise. We've been a specialist firm in that area for 40 years or so. So we've seen the development in the UK from what was a traditional charity sector through the development of social enterprise, through to social financing of social enterprise, the development of the principles of social value having application in relation to public services. We're very much involved in social impact and measurement now, not just from a legal perspective, but from a business consultancy perspective too. As Jonathan has said, in the UK, all through the last, let's say, 15 to 20 years, we've had a major further development in relation to public policy, because starting with the Labour government through the coalition government and into the current Conservative government, there's been a commitment to the concept of reorganisation in public services, away from the idea that they're essentially public sector run, although some of them obviously still will be, towards, on the more right-wing political agenda, being privatised and run by the private sector. But that also means the nature of public service has focused in on the middle course, you might say, that the idea of public services being delivered by organisations that are independent of government, but are also dedicated to public benefit and public service in a way that a purely private and commercial organisation isn't necessarily, although it could be if it was attached to the right value system. And that makes the Commissioner, in a sense, the regulator of the quality of public service delivery by those independent social enterprises. So that's been the development in the UK. The political appreciation of the thinking that I've just outlined has not been as we might have wished, and actually has had a significant stimulus from the Social Business Initiative, because where the idea of social enterprise service provision in public services has been best articulated, really, has been through the Social Business Initiative, dating back to the 2010 document that was published by the European Commission that described how it would be possible to include social focus within public procurement, through to the concept that Anna mentioned at the beginning, the idea that public procurement, which starts as a matter of European competition law, is now and can be seen as an instrument of social policy as well, and that's been very encouraging for the way in which we've been trying to organise public services in the UK. Before the new directive came in, several of the things that are now apparent, more apparent and emphasised within the directive, were ideas we were working with and within the existing procurement rules. And so the innovation and the integration of public services was being developed, and we've seen, as I say, encouragement from the directive. Now, if I just go through the list of things that I've picked out here, the directive helpfully emphasises something we were working with, the idea that commissioning of public service isn't only about procurement, it's about co-production, it's about investment, it's about still subsidising if that's appropriate, and the innovation partnerships were very helpful in those terms, emphasising a particular approach to how you go about public services and supplier organisations collaborating to innovate and to develop and to design services. Another very welcome element was the clarification, the emphasis that what public sector commissioners should be looking at is the meet criteria, and whereas a lot of public authorities in the UK were previously and are still inevitably thinking only in terms of price and not thinking in terms of a price quality equation incorporating social value. That also has been helped, or the development of these ideas has been helped by the GECES outlining of how social impact and social impact measurement can feed into public service design and the criteria for the provision of awards and the assessment of delivery, and the light touch regime and the specific provisions for reserving contracts similarly provide a welcome focus for the social aspects of social enterprise delivery and public service reform. And also, obviously, a lot of social enterprises and socially focused organisations fall within the category of SMEs or smaller businesses, and so they are beneficiaries of the emphasis on supporting smaller suppliers as well. So that's the overall picture. All of those things have been very helpful. The position in the UK, though, is still one where the social business initiative is not well known and not talked about particularly. Still, we find Europe rather unfairly being described as an inhibition to public authorities doing what they really want to do. The procurement rules specifically being described as barriers and obstacles to what can happen. And really, the truth is, as the European Commission has emphasised at various stages, including in the new directive, that's the wrong way round. It's the interpretation of the public authorities that sees limitations where there are no limitations really. And what's really happening is that public authorities aren't embracing their responsibility as commissioners to interpret and to analyse and to assess how public services can be better designed by direct reference to social value and social impact, and still think in terms of receiving bids and assessing those bids more or less on price, and not being more creative and not engaging with the supplier market, whether that's the social enterprises or the more imaginative private sector, to design services that are more directly focused on the purpose and the intent of delivering at a high quality and on a cost-effective basis. Jonathan mentioned the Social Value Act, which is something that slightly contradicts what I've just been saying, because that is about the government identifying this area as something that needs particular focus and cultivation. It, though, was not really directly referenced to the degree to which social value is incorporated into the European rules, which was a missed opportunity, really. And it's been treated rather as if social value is a new subject introduced by the Social Value Act. Now that's, in one sense, very good indeed, because it has meant that many public authorities, having a duty to consider social, economic and environmental impact as part of procurement, for the first time are doing so, or trying to work out how they should do so, where previously they would have perhaps said that the European rules prevented them from doing that. So that's very good indeed. The lack of integration of the social business initiative and some of the reforms that are coming through public procurement and state aid is disappointing, but obviously something we can work on. And so we've had 2 years worth of Social Value Act, and we've just had a review of that Act led by a Conservative peer. And what was very encouraging about that was the review recognised that the Social Value Act, which originally actually was a private member's bill, so it wasn't introduced by government, it was introduced by an independent member of Parliament who proposed it as a good idea. Now, though, with this review, a senior member of government or associated with government has recognised the value of the Social Value Act, and even more significantly, has recognised that there's a business case for it. It isn't just a social phenomenon. It's about good business being represented by the idea that social impact is properly integrated into public services. So the review of the Social Value Act has said it's basically a good idea. We see it's got a business case attached to it, and then absolutely correctly has identified the continuing issues. The continuing issues being that it's still not properly recognised and understood, so there's a lack of awareness still, there's a lack of understanding still, and relating it back to the procurement rules, there's still a lack of understanding about how the law is facilitative in these terms.
Okay, if we could have the next slide. Yeah, just really to finish up with, just wanted to kind of share an example from one of our E3M partners, who the University of Northampton, who are doing a very interesting procurement for the build of their new £320 million campus in the centre of Northampton. And they've set out to really build social value into that contract, and to really lever some of the extra value from what they're spending, and it's a kind of work in progress, but it's going extremely well. They've actually produced a social impact action plan that potential suppliers had to comply with, and of the 5 respondents, 4 of them engaged very productively with the questions, and they've collectively produced around 30 different ideas. And so the successful developer who's gone through is now working with the university to develop a jointly owned social impact action plan, which includes key performance indicators and mechanisms to ensure performance, and then that would then get driven down to the subcontractors. And so we expect we'll see some really interesting things happening there that will be wider than social enterprise, but will include social enterprise in the supply chain through things like the purchase of building slabs, or catering, or other social enterprises that will be part of that. Next slide. So just to finish, there are other measures that are happening in the UK to promote innovation in public service and the use of social enterprise within the context of the new directive. We have the Mutuals programme, which I mentioned, that's being run by the Cabinet Office, supporting local authorities and other public bodies to create public service mutuals. We have a commissioning academy, which is about really trying to get best practice much more widely spread in how services can be commissioned, and the role of procurement within that. The Social Enterprise UK, the kind of national body here, has a Buy Social campaign and a directory that people can access from its website. And our own E3M programme, working with social enterprise leaders, we've now established a bold commissioners club for people in local authorities and health and other public bodies that are really doing interesting things, because as Julian said, while people tend to blame Europe for its rules, actually most of the chains and barriers that are put up are put by public officials here not wanting to do things that are very possible within the rules, and actually have been even under the old directive. So thank you very much, and there are some useful links.
Thank you so much, Jonathan and Julian. Actually, I heard a couple of remarks from our participants that they couldn't hear you perfectly, but I just wanted to mention that you were both in an airport, and that it's actually really great to have you with us, because it was a bit of a tight timing. But thanks a lot for this insight in the UK. I think to understand also the political aspect of this reform is really key. And sitting here with Anna, we think it's really a good example of what is doable with the reform and even beyond. So thanks again a million to both of you. I also take this break to invite the participants to ask questions. As I said at the beginning, you can ask questions in written form in the control box, and also letting us know to whom you would like to ask your question, and we will direct those questions to the right panelists at the end. Our third, let's say, group of speaker is Merlin Sepp, who is working for a foundation in Estonia. I'm not going to say it in Estonian, but in English, it's called the Good Deed Foundation. And the Good Deed Foundation has done a tremendous work of advocacy in order to promote social enterprises in public procurement. I hope we can hear you well, Merlin, because we had a bit of a problem with the technique before, but I leave you the floor from here, and thank you again for being with us.
Can you hear me correctly?
Yes, we can hear you. Maybe just if you can press a bit louder, it would probably be good. It's quite light, the sound.
Thank you. I am Merlin Sepp, and I'm giving you a short presentation about the public procurement situation in Estonia. Next slide, please. And I'm going to do that on 2 levels and through 2 organizations. Changing the public procurement law in Estonia, Estonian Social Enterprise Network Advocacy Experience, and a case study on organizational level, Good Deed Foundation as a venture philanthropy organization's experience in the public procurement market. Both organizations are working very close to each other and have similar challenges. How to develop the ecosystem where would be enough potential high-impact initiatives and a supportive environment to scale up and continue to grow after the exit. How to help build sustainable business models, because diversified financing models and scaling up in many cases assumes being a social enterprise and a public service provider at the same time. So how to survive in a public procurement market? Next slide, please. So we will start with Estonian advocacy experience related to advancing public procurement principles. Next slide, please. Research about public tenders during 2007 till 2011 showed that the main evaluation criteria is lowest price and qualitative criteria is as simple as possible. For example, only CV as a quality proxy. And the situation in 2015 is the same. There are many problems. It's complicated for social enterprises to participate or win the procurements. Societal value is not maximized. The price doesn't cover the real cost of the services, and there's no room, well, a little tiny room for the quality and innovative solutions or impact measurement. And the contracts are short-term. With the European Union Public Procurement Directive, there are many important changes in the new law, like Articles 20 and 77 on reserved contracts for social enterprises are fully included. Also, the wording in the new law is relevant in national contexts, what is social enterprise and so on. The default choice of the most economically advantageous tender is included, so increasing the societal value, and many other changes. But the final result is yet unknown, as the new law is still a draft. It will reach the Parliament this autumn. Next slide, please. So success factors so far are the personal contacts and diverse advocacy methods. Initially, Ministry of Finance was interested in our assistance with translating Articles 20 and 77 correctly and discussing what is relevant in Estonian context. So we had a personal meeting with them. As a result, we got into the list of Ministry's partners, commenting legislation drafts, participating in discussion seminars. We also organized UK's Social Value Act intro seminar in cooperation with British Embassy, where public sector key stakeholders participated. And we wrote an opinion piece to one of the major Estonian daily newspapers, and it got noticed by some key lobbyists of the legislation. Now moving from state level to local government level. Next slide, please. Working with Department of Social Welfare, City of Pärnu, local government hired Social Enterprise Network to prepare impact analysis reports for local non-profits who are public service providers based on our innovative impact mapping methodology. The reports will be used qualitative evaluation when procuring public services in 2016. And we can move on to our case study. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Can you put the next slide, please? Yes. No, the last one. Thank you. So Good Deed Foundation establishes and supports high-impact social initiatives that solve acute problems in Estonian society. So we are partners to the public sector in many levels. I will introduce you 3 portfolio organizations which were established with the help of philanthropy investments and public sector joined a few years later. And 1 example where we launched an innovative program in cooperation with the state and brought in the philanthropy investments afterwards. Next slide, please. So Teach for All Estonia. The problem. The profession of teaching is not popular choice. The best university graduates do not choose this profession, and the average age of the teacher in schools is being close to 48 years. So Ministry of Education and Research joined us as a partner providing the teacher training for the Northampton participants in the university for free. NGO advocacy. The problem. People with special needs are finding it difficult to enter the labor market. Started first in 2009 as a call center and secured working environment operated by disabled people, with some of the target group being held back to the open labor market. Operating last 3 years as a service provider for the unemployment office and helping people with special needs and long-term unemployed back to the open labor market. Next slide, please. Kiva, anti-bullying program. The problem. Estonia had above average rates of school bullying in Europe and no evidence-based programs fighting the cause. Kiva School is an evidence-based program fighting the school bullying developed in Turku University in Finland. Introduced in Estonia using philanthropic capital. After 2 years of operating, the program is now partly financed by the government. And SPIN. Problem. Communities with high crime rates and youth at-risk population not targeted with effective preventative interventions. Good Deed Foundation commissioned by the Ministry of the Interior to set up a sports-based preventative program drawing inspiration from the UK-based KICS model. We had 1-year contract to develop the model, network and set up the program. After the period, we spinned an NGO who, through a procurement process, won the contract for operating the program with the government support for 6 years. Next slide, please. So, as a conclusion, the 2 organization partnership with the public sector, we are moving on with the advocacy on public procurement law, public services. We also are coordinating together social innovation network where we have brought together different ministries, funds, NGOs, researchers and universities. We have different programs with different ministries to boost Estonian NGOs' social innovation capabilities. And we will keep on working with the social impact measurement tool, developing the online tool for funds, local governments, ministries, NGOs. And we keep on developing and launching innovative services, programs, models. So ministers, policymakers, investors, philanthropists, NGO leaders, we have strong community partnership. So there is no big surprise to see ministers or other public sector representatives in our events, because without them, it's hard to accomplish our mission to establish and support high-impact social initiatives that solve acute problems in Estonian society. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Merlin, for this very interesting presentation. I think it's also showing very well the ecosystem dimension of having these rules right and effective in practice. What you're doing at the Good Deed Foundation is extremely impressive, and again, I'm inviting people to ask you questions. We have received a couple already, and we will direct them to each of our panelists after the last presentation. And it is now my big pleasure to welcome Sascha Hasselmeier here. Sascha is CEO of CityMart and also an Ashoka Fellow. He spends his life between the US and New York and Spain, and when he told me that he was available today, I was really happy. He's going to tell us a bit more about how he's using procurement as a open problem solving in city government. So I will leave you the floor here, Sascha, and then meet you all again for the Q&A afterwards. Thank you again.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly. Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Fabulous. Okay. So thank you so much, and it's a real pleasure after the previous speakers who are clearly much more expert on the rules and laws and policies around public procurement. I will say next a lot because usually I flick through slides quickly. So if we can move on to the next slide. Generally, when you look at the experience of a citizen and their expectation from public procurement or what government does, it's often well summarized by saying, I want my government to solve my problem or improve my life in the most effective and fastest way. What happens when this doesn't happen is that we create disillusionment with government, very low levels of public trust in government, and an expectation that when it really, really matters, government may not work for you. So our approach at CityMart is very much to look at how can we assure that public procurement and really anything in particular local governments do serves the purpose of solving problems and is immediately serving the needs of citizens. Next. I'll give you an illustration, and it is quite important. Here's just a small fact from the United States. A recent research has shown that all the master's programs and other university programs in public management, less than 1% of them teach anything, any module on public procurement. Instead, it is seen as almost a clerical task that comes at the end of a policy and strategy process, which is the really interesting thing. And I think what we all know is that the act of procurement, the act of specifying, commissioning, and executing is actually hugely influential and is in itself probably an act of policy making, as those authors argued. A good illustration is how 3.5 million euros were spent by the mayor of St. Paul in Minnesota to help the blind community in their urban mobility. He procured speaking traffic lights, which is basically a backup system for blind people, but actually he procured this not knowing that the Blind Association of the United States years before already passed a memorandum saying that this kind of infrastructure does not actually help blind people. Next. Same year that the mayor of St. Paul in Minnesota invested 3.5 million euros, the same amount was allocated by the mayor of Stockholm to help the blind community with very different results. Both cities are of comparable size or comparable technical and economic resources. Yet Boris here in the striped shirt on the right talks about how he now feels 90% less disabled. His mayor and his city worked on actually improving his life, involving him not just in identifying exactly what problem could be solved to really transform his quality of life, but also engage the market in a way to really find high-value solutions that could serve the purpose of really transforming his lives. So instead of the mayor allocating the task to the traffic department saying, help the blind people, and them responding with what they knew at the time, Stockholm really responded and involved the citizens they were trying to help in the process of both specifying the need as well as designing and procuring the best possible solution. Next. The reason why those two cities came up with such different results is really not a matter of what happens in Stockholm or St. Paul, but is really a systemic issue related to how local governments spend about 10% of world GDP every year. When you look at this, we've run several studies. A recent one that covered 60 global cities. We found that less than 1% of local governments in any form publish their problems or their needs. On average, when they move from identifying a problem into specifying a solution that goes into procurement, they have just 3% market knowledge about the different approaches that could solve the problem at hand. Less than 10% trust new businesses, meaning they would always rather fall back to working with providers that are known to them. And in fact, 67% of them say they, when writing the specification, when specifying what they're expecting the market to deliver, they use informal contacts in the business community, something that even in the best procurement guidebooks available today is recommended as a practice. So this means that actually we have a marketplace in which we operate on 3% market knowledge. Instead of opening our problems, we specify solutions that are badly informed and often in a way that is totally untransparent, meaning that the citizen and even other parts of your own government will not understand how you jump to the conclusion of buying speaking traffic lights, for example. Next. So we found, if you look at then the supply side of this, we found that there is no worse market to be in than to innovate for your city or your community. So the cost of sales, the cost of actually finding a customer and closing deals in being what we call a city innovator. So this can be a social entrepreneur or another entrepreneur who's working for the community good, is 4 times higher than in just about any other industry. And this means that actually we have no venture capital, we have very little investment, we have very few viable business models, and the only solutions that fly are those that do not involve local government. To give you an indication, probably the best known solution in the past probably generation that has spread across local governments and has been implemented widely are the public bicycle systems that many of you will have in your cities. Those are now available in 600 cities. That is 0.1% market penetration. It would in no other industry be celebrated as a success, and it took 45 years to get to this point. You compare this to the success of Uber, the car-sharing service, which within less than 5 years is deployed in 230 cities, but requires some level of interaction, even if it's regulatory battle with local government. And then you look at the success in the same period of time of Airbnb, who do not rely on their business model and solution model in any way on local government, who are now, which is a solution now available and appreciated in 32,000 cities around the world. So unless we begin to unlock the partnership possibilities and the understanding of local government in the way they approach problem solving, we're going to struggle with scaling solutions and creating an attractive marketplace for the kind of socially minded entrepreneurs we're trying to promote. Next. So let me show you what we think procurement can and should look like. What you see here is a €1 million tender, an RFP published by the city of Barcelona, which actually is directed not to a small community of vendors, but is actually targeting every single citizen of the city. Next. It's probably the first procurement that was advertised even in the metro stations of the city, and it basically asked a simple question. Are you able to solve one of 6 problems the city is trying to address? And if so, you can bid for the contract to not only win a prize or present your idea, but actually win the contract to deliver the service. This was really groundbreaking in many ways, because the actual tender document included no specification, just a problem statement. We managed to reduce the terms and conditions of the tender documentation from 150 pages proposed by the city attorney to 26 pages in plain English, understandable by everyone. And we managed to bring down the requirements of participation to the simplicity and ease of access that was previously unknown in the city. Next. As a result, we had phenomenal engagement. This is a tweet on a Saturday morning by a citizen called Anna, who actually writes over the weekend, posting lifestyle pictures, how she's thinking about using a public procurement to change her life. She's debating on whether she will leave her job and become a social entrepreneur starting on Monday and preparing her bid for this contract that will change her life. It's probably the first lifestyle picture of a tender document. Next. The program had really remarkable results. We had, on a normal procurement of this size, the city would expect 20 submissions. Sorry, can we have the next slide, please? Thank you. On a normal procurement of €1 million, the city would expect 20 downloads of the RFP documentation and about 5 bids that would be submitted, typically by known vendors. In this procurement, we had 55,000 citizens and entrepreneurs, half of them from Barcelona and half of them from around the world, access the RFP page and informing themselves about this procurement opportunity. We had 119 bids submitted. 12 of those were new businesses created by citizens within the space of time between the publication of the tender and the submission deadline. And these 12 businesses qualified themselves for the final round of bid submission. It's probably the first public tender with real mass communications, trying to explain to the citizen both how the city is using procurement to solve problems, but also inviting the citizens to participate. It took 9 months from the publication, from the photo in the underground to the actual contract award, so it was relatively fast. And all the contracts were awarded at 30% below cost at higher quality, meaning the budget the city had set aside to tackle these problems was actually undercut by 30%, and all of the technical staff in the city government say they have been exposed to solutions they hadn't known before. The bids were of higher quality, and they feel that the city is taking a lesser risk in actually delivering the services, which is remarkable given that we've lowered the entry barrier so much for participation. Next. So we really built CityMart as an organization that helps local governments around the world to align their vision and their management and their procurement with the mission of problem solving. We've run these programs with 58 city governments to date in 25 countries in Europe, Latin America, Africa, Asia, and here in the United States. And we're providing a combination of support to cities that both provide methodology in building procurements based on problem statements, but also then building the internal capacity and the social understanding of why procurement matters and why procurement is an important part of social and community policy. Next. I'll jump through these cases very quickly just to illustrate what can happen in these processes. Next. This is a $20 million procurement in the city of San Francisco to upgrade their streetlights. And the city discovered a requirement that they wanted an open system so that the city can consolidate many technological infrastructures by leveraging their wireless control system for the lighting upgrade. Next. The winner of this program was a small company from Switzerland that was unknown to the city, that actually followed the equivalent of the Internet Open Standards in developing urban infrastructure, and was set to save the city a $3 million rollout cost, $27 million in savings by rationalizing technologies, but more importantly, providing an open technology that citizens and others in the city can contribute to. Next. This is really a story to talk about the power procurement can have in scaling small solutions by small vendors to really full scale. Next. It's in the city of San Cugat in Spain, and the city in 2010 went out to look for solutions that help the city transform the way it manages public services. Next. It gave an opportunity to do pilot implementation to a company called World Sensing, which at that point had nothing but a technology prototype and had been unable to find a government partner to actually demonstrate the viability of their product. From putting their first sensor into the ground in Sant Cugat within 2 years, they moved from having a prototype demonstrating the viability at no cost to the city government to winning the largest ever urban sensor contract with the city of Moscow, deploying 12,000 sensors and transforming the way the city manages parking and provides secures revenue and fair participation in the cost of parking in the city. Next. So we've applied this mechanism to a wide range of social and other technical challenges. And really, this is just an overview of some of the social entrepreneurs that have been really successful in accessing contracts at a fraction of the cost they normally experience in working with local government. On average, a city entrepreneur will spend about 120,000 euros to win a public contract. And these entrepreneurs all have invested less than 7,000 euros to win a partnership or contract or regulatory support by local government. And as you can see, the same mechanism is operating in legal contexts as diverse as Barcelona, Cape Town, or Lagos, or right now in New York. Next. So to conclude, from our side, much of what is often standing in the way of making social entrepreneurs really benefit, social change really benefit from public procurement is the intention and the approach brought to using public procurement as a method of problem solving. We try to develop a very resilient process that allows us to really manage the intention and the ultimate need in city government, and opening this to encourage innovation, but also the sharing of proven solutions across cities. And the diagram you're looking here is not just beautiful, but is actually the way that we ourselves measure our impact, where on the left side you have the cities that have published problems using our methodology, and on the right side it shows the community where they found solutions. Out of more than 100 programs, we've ever only had one problem that did not have a solution available elsewhere. And this is really significant, because unless we scale solutions, we're not helping social enterprises scale. Unless we scale solutions, we're wasting huge amounts of resources and, more importantly, a valuable time of our citizens in reinventing the wheel, and often replicating the mistakes and learnings already undertaken elsewhere. So I thank you for listening. I hope this was relevant in this context, and help hand back to the organizers.
Thank you very much, Sasha. Relevant, I'm sure. I mean, I know it is, because we can see with your very concrete examples what we're talking about. And of course, policy is sometimes very far from people, but at the end of the day, it's concrete. And I really hope we have more of these tendering contracts on Twitter. I have received a few questions that I will display on my screen and then direct to our speakers. I have a question from Ellen to Jonathan, and it's a bit of a tricky question. But the question is, how do we stop procurers using Europe as a defensive position? How can we influence those who aren't bold and brave? So I think it's also maybe a question for Merlin. It's really how to make this happen. I don't know if Jonathan or Merlin, you have an idea of how to reply to Helen.
Yeah, I've got some ideas.
I know you do. Go ahead.
I think one of the things last period was a very useful thing that the European Commission did, Julian referred to it, was the publication of this document called Buying Social, that was put together by DG Employment and DG Market, as it was now where Anna's working in DG Grow, and that actually gave confidence to some people to do things a bit differently. And so I think the Commission has done a fantastic job in getting the new directive out there, and that the member states are, transposing it. But I think the job's not finished. I think that the Commission could actually do more to help drive down the understanding of what you can do within the directive to local public authorities working with the member states. And so I think that's about producing guidance, it's about collecting good practice. We heard some brilliant examples, for example, of what people have been doing in Barcelona. We should be collecting those and other examples from other parts of Europe and inspiring those people who want to use Europe as an excuse not to do things, to turn it the other way around and to use it as a way of showing what can be done.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Julian, do you want to add?
I'd like to add one thing,
Yeah.
Which Jonathan almost said, and it's about the nature of guidance in relation to these subjects where facilitation and purposive legislation is what we're really talking about to a large degree. And it's the simple point that guidance could be very helpful if it was describing what's possible, what's being facilitated, rather than limiting itself to the technical law. Now, actually, I'd say that's what tends to characterize guidance wherever it comes from. And what would be very helpful in dealing with the attitude of mind which says we can't do this, these are obstructions, this isn't possible, would be just to help the interpretation and the analysis, offer guidance which allows interpretation and presents how it can actually be done.
Thank you very much, Jonathan and Julian. Maybe I can let Anna ask you a question that she told me during the presentation.
Yes, hello. Well, first of all, thank you for your presentations, because they're very helpful also for us to understand a bit what are the good practices out there, because we're always in desperate need of knowing what the good practices are, especially in this field. And I found especially interesting the Barcelona Open Challenge one, which is interesting for a number of reasons. I mean, it's interesting for SMEs, it's interesting for its social impact, it's interesting for innovation, so thank you for that. Regarding what Julian was talking about, he was listing a few initiatives by the Cabinet Office, like the Commissioning Academy and the Public Mutuals program, and I was interested to know whether these were programs that were running before the reform, or were somehow adapted to the reform, and if he knows if there's anything in the pipeline regarding, let's say, the central government initiatives in this field.
Okay, well, the Cabinet Office Mutual Programme is complementary to what we've been discussing in relation to social enterprise, but not necessarily initiated with that in mind, I would say. It's because if you think of what public service reform means to different people and different politicians, one possible way of reorganising public services is to privatise, and so that's part of that initiative. Another initiative that is complementary and that fed into that programme was the idea that employee participation or employee ownership is a very good thing that leads to better services. So there are models in the UK that are quite famous where they're recognised as having good employee engagement practices, and the government's quite convinced that that's a progressive direction. That's why they're called mutuals. So we've got privatisation in there, we've got mutualisation in there, and what we say is you can equally understand that socially focused, purpose-driven organisations can provide benefits, particularly in public services. And the truth is that a lot of these new independent organisations that have been promoted by that government programme could actually be more accurately described as social enterprises than as mutuals. The Commissioning Academy is a recognition that the real problem, in as far as there is a problem in relation to this area, is in the way commissioners go about their business, that they aren't creative and imaginative as creative and imaginative as they could be, that they see barriers and obstacles where there are none, where analysis and interpretation and application would be good things. So the Commissioning Academy, I think, is recognising that, although it is still going through a very public sector way of thinking and isn't necessarily immediately solving the problem, but it's moving in the right direction.
Okay. Thank you, Julian. Maybe that is bringing me to a follow-up question, and then I have two other questions. My question is to Sasha: what is the best way of convincing local commissioners to change the paradigm they're following? Normally, they're really conservative and they don't really think out of the box. And I don't know if you have an advice on that. And then I'll just group two questions that we received from participants, and then we'll close after these total of 3 questions. A second question I have here is from Jennifer, and Jennifer is asking this to our UK speakers, so Jonathan and Julian. I don't know if you will have an answer to that, but I will ask you anyways. She's asking, do you have any examples on how public procurement is done in global public health, specifically for medicines and vaccines for developing countries? So when EU, for example, is helping as a donor or through international cooperation. It's an open question, maybe it's not UK focused, but if you have elements of answer, that would be welcome. And then the last question that I'm addressing to Merlin, and it's a question that we're having from Aurélie, from ENSIE. It's a European network of social enterprise for work integration. She has a question about what are you doing, Merlin, with the ESEN on social impact measurement? It's indirectly related with what we're speaking about here, but an answer would be very appreciated. And then I'll leave you maybe 2 minutes each, Sasha first, and then Julian, Jonathan, and then Merlin, and then we'll wrap it up. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you. So that's a great question. I think it's a combination of reminding commissioners and others that they are working in government to provide public service and that their decisions are directly affecting someone's experience of their day-to-day life. And this is really about triggering what often is an aha moment where people have simply forgotten their role in actually delivering specific change. And this we combine with exposing them to the reality, how far other cities have gone. We're constantly pushing the boat out a little further on making them feel that they're not the first movers and that the specific obstacles they face have been overcome by someone. What we've learned is really that governments trust no one else but a peer government or that experience. So I think building these case studies and helping everyone to collectively develop a new approach and attitude has really been instrumental in making that happen.
Yeah, concrete stories I think is a good trick here. About the question about developing countries and public health, I don't know, Jonathan or Julian, if you have an answer for this.
No, I'm afraid I don't think we do we, Julian?
Not really related to what we've been discussing, I don't think. I mean, it's, I mean, in a sense, it's a procurement beyond the rules we're talking about if it's got that international focus.
Indeed.
So I don't think we can really comment, sorry.
No, it's fine. I think, Jennifer, if you're still with us online, just send me an email and then we'll try to reply in more detail. And then the last question for Merlin about this SN social impact measurement question from Aurélie.
Yes, Estonian Social Enterprise Network has started from 2013 assisting our members in measuring and presenting their outcomes and impact. So we have our impact mapping methodology. We do it with short measurement reports. These reports present outcomes and impact by using key numbers, personal stories, and photos. And this year we will build our measurement reports so that it can be written online. We're developing the online tool for NGOs. So right now we do it in computer, in Word, but now we are developing the e-system, online system.
Thank you, Merlin. Aurélie, if you need more details about this, I can also put you in direct touch with Merlin for sure. It's 4:33, and we really try to stick on the timing, so we will stop here. And I really want to thank you all our speakers, Anna, Jonathan, Julian, Merlin, and Sasha, for your great interventions. It's really very valuable, I think, in this field to have concrete examples, also very policy and political aspects of this debate on public procurement. I remind everyone that this webinar has been recorded and will be put online next week together with this presentation. If you have other questions about policy or our activities here at EVPA, you can contact me or my colleague Lisa. We'll be happy to reply to your questions. We close this presentation by thanking our sponsors, Omidia, Adesium, BMW Stichting, and Acanthus. And last but not least, we would like to invite you all to come to our annual conference in Madrid this year. It's going to be on the 1st and 2nd of December, and about the topic Different Voices, a Shared Future. So I think we will wrap it up here. Thank you again to everyone for attending this session, and we'll organize another 3 webinars throughout 2016 in February, June, and October. So stay tuned in our website and newsletters and everything if you want to know about it. And I'll close from here then. Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.